Baldwin when they were filming a scene of him kind of cross-drawing the pistol out of his holster and pointing it at the camera. They wanted the shot where it was going to point right at the camera, and the gun went off, and she got killed, and the bullet actually traveled and hit another director on the scene, Joel Souza. And so there's been a lot of cooperation on Alec Baldwin's part. He's been public about it. He went on interviews. He's claimed that he didn't even pull the trigger, that the gun just went off. And so the sheriffs did a 1-year investigation on this case, and they finally turned it over to the DAs recently, and the DAs came out and said, we're charging Alec Baldwin and also the armorer on the movie set with involuntary manslaughter on 2 separate theories. And the theories are, well, basically, what is involuntary manslaughter? Involuntary manslaughter means you didn't intend to do it. It's a felony crime where you killed somebody and you did not intend to do it. And the way they prove that out there in New Mexico, and it's like that in a lot of states, is number one, they prove that you were, and this is the New Mexico DA comes out and says, you know, if you were negligent with what you did. That's not completely true when you get into it, but we'll get into that in a minute. The other way they prove it is if you committed a unlawful act, which is not a felony. And so there have been cases where there's a crime on the books out there in New Mexico, which is negligent use of a firearm. So if you negligently use a firearm, doesn't matter if you shoot somebody, doesn't matter if you kill somebody, if you negligently use a firearm, then you can be convicted of that misdemeanor. And so what they're saying is, well, involuntary manslaughter against Alec Baldwin is you killed somebody while you committed the misdemeanor of negligent use of a firearm. And so that's one theory that they're going to put towards Alec Baldwin. The second theory is involuntary manslaughter, not misdemeanor manslaughter rule, but the second theory is you killed somebody and you did it without due caution or circumspection, which means basically you weren't careful enough. And the New Mexico DA says, look, that's a negligence ruling. She's a little bit incorrect about that, and maybe she has a misunderstanding, because I saw her come on the news and actually give the statement as to why she's charging Alec Baldwin. But it's not just negligence. Criminal law does not like to charge people on an accident. Like if you had an accident and you didn't intend to do something, criminal law doesn't like to punish that. So when you look at involuntary manslaughter statutes, especially out there in New Mexico, what they've said is you need criminal negligence. And criminal negligence is more than you just didn't act with ordinary care. When you just don't act with ordinary care and something happens to somebody, that's negligence for a civil lawsuit. You can sue them for money. But the law looks at when you're going to be subject to penal punishment, penal meaning you're going into prison, that they don't want to just punish regular negligence. And New Mexico Supreme Court has come out multiple times and said involuntary manslaughter, and even when you're looking at some of the misdemeanors, regular ordinary negligence is not going to be punishable. It has to rise to criminal negligence. And so what does that mean? Criminal negligence means it wasn't that you just weren't careful enough. That's not what it means. It means that you were actually reckless with your behavior. And so what does reckless mean? Well, it means that you knew that something was going to be unsafe and you just disregarded the safety of people. So both of these charges are levied against Alec Baldwin. And I don't know if the DAs understand this or not, because when I actually saw the DA on the TV, it seemed like she really didn't know the ins and outs of what she's charging. But based on what I've seen from the investigation, I go, these are very viable charges against Alec Baldwin that are coming up. Why? Because he's also a producer on the set. Not only the actor that had the gun in his hand, but as a producer on the set. And as a producer on the set, who is basically the main funding behind this low-budget movie, which cost estimated $21 million. I mean, $21 million is considered low budget these days. But look, he was a producer on the set, and there was a lot of things that came out in the investigation, things that were even told to the media in interviews by people who were on that set, people who didn't take the jobs on that set, a guy who quit the movie the day before the shooting happened and sent an email to producers, that these were very dangerous conditions out there. So Alec Baldwin is more so, in my opinion, liable as the producer on this set that had notice of all these conditions. And he acted reckless as the producer on the set. And then maybe because he knew how the conditions were on the set, because of his role as producer, maybe being handed that gun at the last moment and someone yelled, "Cold gun," and when he pulled the trigger, or he says he didn't pull the trigger, the gun went off, then it was reckless behavior. Now, let's get into what we know about what happened on the set of that movie. Okay. Well, we know Rust was shot in New Mexico, and it's supposed to be a 21-day shoot. And this is relevant. Why? Because 21 days isn't a long time to shoot a movie. And they took a lot of budget. They cut corners on everything. This is what's coming out about the movie. This is what the sheriff's investigation turned up. This is what people on the set were saying. The emails back and forth between the crew members, including the armorer who was also charged with involuntary manslaughter. She's also charged. And it's her first time actually being the lead armorer on a set. So why is she having her first job as a lead armorer on a set? Well, let's get to it. We have interviews with other veteran prop masters and armorers who turned down the job for this movie. They turned down the job. Neil W. Zarumsky is a veteran prop master out there in Hollywood, man. He's done a lot of movies. And he turned down the position. September 2021, he says, I'm not taking this job. He tells Times, the New York Times, he was troubled, and I quote, by the producer's refusal to hire a fully staffed props department, including an armorer to handle the guns and another person as a props assistant. He said, no, the producers are insisting that one person was going to do both jobs. And he didn't feel comfortable taking that position because of that. Because one person can't do both of those jobs on a movie like that. This was a Western movie, Rust. There was going to be a lot of gun scenes. Over half the days of the 21 days were going to be gun firing scenes. So he didn't want to, he said, no, I'm turning down that paycheck. I'll wait for the next job. At least a dozen other experienced prop masters and armorers turned down the job on Rust. So who gets hired? Hannah Gutierrez Reed. She's 24 years old. She's trying to make it out there in Hollywood. And she gets hired to oversee all the weapons and the bullets and projectiles and blanks that are going to be used on the set. It's her first time being a head armorer. Or actually, I'm reading here. I'm mistaken. Her second job is head armorer. Her first was a Nicolas Cage movie called The Old Way back in 2021. But she's new, right? And she's trying to make it. And so she says, look, she's concerned. She sent emails to the producers that she was being stretched too thin on Rust. These are the emails that have come out in the investigation. She's emailed producers multiple times. I'm being stretched too thin. That there's guns that are being left unattended on the sets. I don't have time to check every single gun because I'm doing both jobs over here. I'm doing both jobs. So she has put the producers on notice, and they have basically deflected all of her complaints. She acknowledged that she loaded the weapons that day. She acknowledged that she loaded these weapons. So what? So this is what it really comes down to. There's not supposed to be any live ammunition on the set of a movie. None. But somehow a live bullet was in that gun that killed Helena Hutchins, the camerawoman, the cinematographer. A live bullet is what shot out of that gun. So how did live ammunition make it into the gun? Why was there live ammunition on the set? If there was live ammunition on the set, who was responsible for checking to make sure the ammunition loaded into that gun wasn't live ammunition? You probably heard the term blanks, right? I mean, shooting blanks. And I thought myself, when I first heard about shooting blanks, I thought you're just shooting. It's not even a bullet coming out of the gun. It's like a cap gun. It's just making the noise. You know, that's not true, though. That's not true. You know, blanks actually do shoot a projectile. And you need to be a couple feet away from it in order for it not to harm you. And on the scene of Rust, there was actually someone shot them in the foot with one of these guns with a blank and injured their foot. That was one of the mishaps that happened on set. Another prop person accidentally had a live misfire, didn't shoot anybody, but had a live misfire, right, of a blank. And there was actually an explosion that went off on the set. And this is why the guy quit the day before Helena Hutchins was killed. He quits the set. He sends an email. He quits the movie. He sends an email to producers, and he says he has never seen such abhorrent safety precautions on a movie set before. So these are the things that are coming out that are making Alec Baldwin, as a producer, have knowledge that things were a little bit more dangerous than they should have been. People on that set, including the guy who quit, said safety protocols that are usually in place in all the movies they've ever worked on are not in place on the Rust set. And the only thing the producers are telling everybody is, this is a low budget movie. We can't go over budget. We got 21 days to shoot. We got 12 days of actual filming, and we got to go, 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 go. People were being overworked. At the time, the unions of people who work on these films were actually about to go on a strike. And Alec Baldwin came out, and I think in an Instagram post at the time of the shooting, before the shooting, but at the time the film was being shot, he goes, hey, people in the industry, frontline workers, if you feel like you're being wronged, do the strike. So he's behind the people. At the same time, he is implementing what the unions and union workers are considering conditions that violate their current union agreement. Forget about what they're trying to bargain for. They're not even getting what they bargained for on the set of Rust. So this guy quits. He sends that email. So that's what the DAs are looking at. They go, all right, we've uncovered the fact that a bunch of Hollywood veteran armorers and prop masters didn't want to take this because they were concerned about safety, that you weren't hiring enough people. Then you hired someone who was kind of inexperienced to lead it and take 2 jobs when really you need 2 people for those 2 jobs, and she's going to take it. She voiced concerns that she couldn't do it for 2 jobs, and still all of that just went neglected. And now we have somebody dead. Look, I was the same as everybody when this came out, that this is an accident and you're not going to see Alec Baldwin get criminal charges. But the sheriff turned over a 512-page report to the DA's office after a year of investigating. Multiple interviews, interviewing other people in Hollywood. And the DA started looking at the case a little bit different. I'm telling you, they were like, this is finger licking good right here. We got Alec Baldwin as a producer. This is going to be an offensive set of facts that we can put in front of a jury. And this is going to be what we call a sexy involuntary manslaughter case. A lot of those cases, you get involuntary manslaughter charged, and it's not like that jury appeal case because the intent is not there. Well, let's talk about some of the things that are going to come out that might come back to bite Alec Baldwin. He claimed he did not pull the trigger. Okay, this gun was sent off. The actual gun that was shot was handed to law enforcement by the armorer Hannah Gutierrez Reed the day of the shooting. They sent that gun off for testing. That gun was tested by firearms and ballistics experts. And those ballistics experts have concluded that this hammer revolver, which Alec Baldwin's story is he pulled the gun out, he points it at the camera, and he pulled the hammer back, and then the gun just fired. So it's a malfunctioning gun, right? Well, these experts say no. They put it through extensive testing, and there's absolutely no way that gun fired without the trigger being pulled. And as a prosecutor, trigger pull is something you always bring up when we're at trial, and there's always this. Defendants try this all the time to say, oh, I didn't pull the trigger, or it was an accidental pull where I did not intend to shoot. You're in a murder case where it's like we're proving that you premeditated and intended to kill somebody. It's a good defense if you could say, hey, I was holding the gun, but the gun went off, or I didn't even mean to pull the trigger. The trigger pull was so light. So firearms experts, that's one of the first things they look for. How hard do you need to pull back the trigger in order for that gun to fire? And I'll tell you, on these revolvers, a lot of times, if you've never shot a firearm, it's not the easiest thing in the world to just pull a trigger back on some of these revolvers. So they put it through extensive testing, and what law enforcement experts are going to say is, you absolutely could not have fired that gun without pulling the trigger. It wasn't you pulled the hammer back and it malfunctioned. We put it through extensive testing. Here's the problem with it, though, okay? I don't see Alec Baldwin pleading guilty to a felony involuntary manslaughter. I could see him taking a lesser plea, like one of the first directors just took a couple months ago, and we'll get into that. He took a plea to misdemeanor negligent use of a firearm, which means he might be testifying against Alec Baldwin. He actually took a plea to negligent use of a firearm, so now he will not have Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination because his case is pretty much done and closed. He can't incriminate himself. That's what prosecutors do. They get people to plea out, and then they get them to testify later. Now, usually you don't give the guy the deal and have him actually plead guilty and enter it until after you got that testimony. But there's several ways to skin a cat, so this could potentially be testimony used against Alec Baldwin. But let's get it. What is the problem here at trial? When we get to trial, yeah, law enforcement's going to have their firearm experts up there saying, no, that gun could not have gone off by accident. Well, I'm telling you, as a former prosecutor and now current criminal defense attorney here in Las Vegas, expert witnesses on both sides come out, and you got experts on the defense side. They're going to say what the defense want them to say. And you got experts on the law enforcement side. They're going to say what law enforcement wants them to say. They're hired guns. I'm not saying that the law enforcement experts just say whatever law enforcement needs them to say. It's usually the defense experts that kind of go over the line and say whatever they need to say in order to justify their paychecks. Why is that? Well, this is what they do for a living, and they're not getting hired by law enforcement. So how much money do you think a defense expert who charges $300, $400, $500, $600, $1,000 a day, $300 an hour for their testimony and their preparation for testimony? They're making a lot of money. This is what they do for a living. If they start testifying contrary to what the defense attorneys want them to say, the defense attorneys are not going to hire them. So these are hired guns. And this is how messed up the entire system is, as far as once their testimony makes it into the record, and then these appellate attorneys review the record, and they use that record to submit it to Supreme Court judges and appellate judges. These appellate judges are treating this hired gun testimony as if it's true, and it kind of changes the landscape of how to do trials later. Well, that's what's really going on. So let's get down to what the defense experts are going to say for Alec Baldwin. Well, they're going to say, no, definitely the gun could have malfunctioned. That's what they're going to say. And all a defense attorney needs to do is raise a reasonable doubt to the propriety of the charges, to the guilt of the charges. And by duty, a jury is supposed to acquit that person if there's a reasonable doubt. It has to be beyond all reasonable doubt. It's a high prosecutor for a burden, high burden for a prosecutor to meet. And there's a reason for that. We don't want to put people in prison or give them felonies unless a jury of your peers believes that you did the crime beyond all reasonable doubt. So the experts are going to say that. But here's the further problem. Not only would the experts say that even if the gun was still viable to be tested, but what has come out is that the law enforcement experts, the ballistic experts that were testing this firearm, they tested it enough to get to their conclusions, but then it did actually have a misfire. It did. But it was after the gun broke during testing. So the gun is broken now. And then it had a misfire after it broke. So they tested it so much, and it was probably an older gun, it finally broke. So now the defense experts are going to have a field day with this. We can't even test the gun ourselves because they broke it during testing. And now they're saying they pulled the trigger X amount of times before it broke, and it never had a misfire before that. Well, it could. The defense experts are going to come out and say it could have had misfires before that. You just didn't get it to do it. And now since you broke the gun, our experts can't even look at it. Matter of fact, this might not even be a trial issue. Alec Baldwin, I'm sure, is going to have some pretty good attorneys. They're going to get paid very well. So they're going to do a lot of work before trial to justify the money that they're getting. They're going to challenge this before trial. They're going to say, Judge, we want you to exclude the firearms expert testimony from the law enforcement because they didn't even preserve the weapon for us to test ourselves. They tested it until it broke, and now it is misfiring exactly how Alec Baldwin said it misfired in his hand. Either way, does this lend itself towards a finding of reasonable doubt at a trial on involuntary manslaughter, which, look, in the minds of jurors, everybody's going to sit back there and say, this is an accident. This is an accident. And that's going to be sitting in the back of their mind whenever these other things are being raised. If you're sitting at a trial and someone stabs somebody 39 times to death after breaking into their house, and a little bit of this expert testimony comes out that could raise a reasonable doubt, juries are human. They're less apt to even think they're going to let this killer off the hook for that. But this is not a cold stone killing. The prosecutor's not alleging that. So it's going to come down to how offensive they find everything else that happened on the set. So that's one aspect of Alec Baldwin's defense, that his claim, which he's maintained since it happened, that he did not even pull the trigger. If he can get one juror to believe that, or one juror just to doubt that maybe he didn't pull the trigger, it's reasonable to think he didn't pull the trigger, well, Alec Baldwin's going to walk. He's going to walk. The other thing that we can look at when it actually gets down to the trial is, as an actor, Alec Baldwin is saying somebody hands me a gun and says cold gun, and cold gun in the industry means there's no live ammunition in there, that he should be able to rely on that. So there's nothing criminally negligent. There's nothing reckless about him, even if he pulled the trigger to think that it was going to fire a bullet. That's where it comes into play as what was his knowledge as a producer on how bad the safety conditions were there at the scene. So involuntary manslaughter on Alec Baldwin, this is what we're talking about here. People ask, why did the second victim, Joel Souza, he was a director on the set, he got struck by the bullet. There's not going to be any charges for Joel Souza. Well, with Joel Souza, they're saying that there was no intent, says the DA, to pull the trigger. There's no intent to shoot Joel Souza, so you can't transfer the intent. And, I'm not so sure about that. I think the DA is kind of missing the ball on this. If you have intent, this is the doctrine of transferred intent. And in law school, they paint the picture-perfect example of this is if you shoot a gun into a crowd, you don't intend to hit anybody in that crowd, but you should know that that bullet has a great chance of hitting somebody. Or let's say I'm sitting here and I got somebody in the room and I intend to shoot them. I miss them. I hit the next person. That intent transfers over. So I'm not so sure if the DA is right about this. They wouldn't be able to charge involuntary manslaughter with Joel Souza. They'd have to go with a battery charge. You'd have to do a little bit more research. But man, if you're kind of stretching the charges right now already, if you can charge as the DA, you try to get more leverage. So one thing that concerned me when I'm looking at this case is the amount of investigation that actually went into it. Okay, you have an accidental killing, and I'm telling you that there was extra care put into this case. There was extra investigation done on this case. A 512-page report done on an accidental shooting. It's only done because it's Alec Baldwin. I mean, I look on court TV and they say, no, you treat everybody under the law the same. That's how we do it in the U.S. That's not true. I'm telling you, that's not true. I've been in the trenches so long. Everybody does not get treated the same. Justice is not blind, and the law is not applied equally. And I'll tell you, it's kind of the reverse of what some people think. Some people think, oh, the people who are rich and are famous, or the media is covering them, that they get treated better. I'll tell you, sometimes it's exactly the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. Sometimes when you're a public figure, you get treated harsher because of the fact that you're famous. Sometimes because you have a lot of money. When the media is covering it, you get treated harsher because the DAs are elected officials, and elected officials have aspirations as politicians also. They're looking to go on further. So if they can make their name off of prosecuting somebody who has notoriety, man, it only takes a lawyer one big case, in their career to make their name. Think about Johnny Cochran. Johnny Cochran, yeah, everybody knew him in LA. He was this big civil rights attorney. But man, he represented OJ and won the OJ case. His career was set after that. Set. I think about local attorneys here in Las Vegas. Chesnoff and Schoenfeld. What? They represent Paris Hilton and Bruno Mars on some cocaine possession charges, and they are set. They're set. Now they represent Marshawn Lynch. They represent all these people. Well, it works the same in government too. As a prosecutor, if you prosecute a really big time case, the public is going to be aware of it, and you're going to be able to have a good political career. And so here, they're going after Alec Baldwin, and they did a ton of investigation. But I don't have a problem with investigating a case where someone got killed. I mean, look, this cinematographer got killed. She had kids. It looks like the things that were being done on the set of Rust were completely out of line with industry standards, that they were reckless, and someone needs to be held accountable. I get that. Investigate the hell out of it. Do it. And if charges are warranted, bring them. Like I said, I think this case is going to have jury appeal. I think based on what we're hearing from other people who turned down the job, people who quit the set, and people who are on the set, and the emails that are damning that it came out about the safety precautions on the set, I think this makes this case very, very sexy to a jury, and a jury will be offended when they hear about it. That being said, why is the sheriff's report already in the hands of Court TV? Court TV, as journalists, have already gotten the full 512 pages of reports. This is very, very strange to me, because when you're prosecuting a case as a DA, you're always trying not to leak all this internal investigation out to the media while the case is still pending. And they've leaked it out before they even filed charges, and they're leaking it out at the same time that they are telling everyone we're filing charges. All of a sudden, these journalists have 512 pages of reports in their hands. I find that very curious. You go down into Texas, down in Uvalde, they still won't disclose their internal reports on that. But here, everything's just turned over. There's a good reason not to turn things over in somebody's case, especially in Alec Baldwin's case. And this is the reason why law enforcement, and when I was a prosecutor, I would advise law enforcement, don't turn the body camera over to the news so they can run wild with it on the news. Why? Especially in a case like Alec Baldwin, you are tainting the jury pool. The potential jury pool out there that can hear this case, the Alec Baldwin case is going to be all over the media. They're going to be dissecting these reports. It's going to be on the news every night. Every potential juror, unless they're living under a rock, is going to know details about the investigation. You're in jury selection as an attorney. We'll submit a jury question ahead of time so we don't have to waste time in court. Are you privy to any of the news reports about this case? If so, if you even know that Alec Baldwin shot somebody, let's get you off the jury right now. Let's get you off the jury, because normally you wouldn't have to get them off the jury just because they were aware of the case in the media. You could cure a lot of that. But the fact that we have all of these 512-page the complete investigation out there for public consumption at this point, and whatever the reporters take is going to be on it, that's what they're going to report. And they're going to say, this is what the sheriff's investigation said here. This is what the sheriff's investigation said there. Well, jurors are going to come in. And here's a big problem. What jurors are not going to want to sit on the Alec Baldwin case? You get a jury summons, you go down to court, man, I really feel bad for you if you get put on one of these construction defect cases that take 6 months, and we're talking about light switches being put 2 feet in the wrong place. And so then we had to go back and fix all the light switches so that we could put the sinks in the right place. And it's 6 months of expert testimony. Man, I feel bad for you. But you come in there, it's like, oh, this is the Alec Baldwin case? Oh, how long is it going to take? 2 weeks? Oh, man, I want to sit for jury service on this. Well, have you been privy to any information, ma'am or sir, that might ruin your ability to be impartial on this case? Have you heard anything about the investigation? The 512-page report that the media was given before they even filed charges. Have you seen any of that? No, not me. And what little bit I have heard, I could sit on this case. Oh, man. And that's another reason why the defense attorneys for Alec Baldwin, you don't plead him out on this case. You take it to trial, because a lot of trials get overturned on appeal. And a lot of trials get overturned because of jury selection issues, right? Jury selection issues. A juror comes out after the case and says, hey, yeah, this is what went on, especially with the Alec Baldwin case. All the media wants to interview them, and there's nothing blocking them from writing a book about jury deliberations. Imagine a book comes out a year and a half, 2 years after the case, and the juror is going, oh, yeah, I was going home and I was looking at the 512-page sheriff investigation report on my laptop. I was Googling it because we were not sequestered. Or before trial, I just wanted to be on the case so bad that I told him I didn't see this. Hey, case getting reversed. And so, yeah, I have a big problem with them turning over the entire sheriff's investigation report. I find it very, very curious. We've already seen on the news, there's footage of the interviews that Alec Baldwin is giving to investigators in the interview room after the shooting happened. This stuff is available online if you Google it. This is ridiculous. This is not the way that an investigation is supposed to be ran. This is not the way a prosecution is supposed to take place. We got more to talk